This is Max and Mia podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. You're listening to the Max and Mia podcast. I'm Matthew.
And I'm Rachel. And if you're new here, first of all, welcome. We're really glad you found us.
And if you've been with us for a while, you already know how this goes. Every Wednesday, it's not Max and Mia, it's us.
It's us.
Today has a different energy. We're keeping things calm, relaxed, and very, very real.
So wherever you are right now, on the bus, in the car, walking home, maybe lying on your couch doing absolutely nothing productive.
Which is a completely valid life choice, by the way.
Completely valid. This episode is for you. We designed it so you can just listen. No pressure. No need to pause and take notes every 5 seconds. Just let the English wash over you.
And that's actually one of the best ways to improve your listening skills, not by forcing it, but by making it feel natural, familiar, like a conversation you're already part of.
Because honestly, you kind of are. You're here with us.
Now, today's episode is a little special because we're not just here to help you improve your English. We're here to talk about something that actually matters in real life.
We're talking about self-confidence, about fear, and how to stop letting it make decisions for you, about setting goals and not giving up when things get hard.
And a lot more. We have a good one today.
So here's a question for you, and you don't have to answer out loud, obviously, but think about it. When was the last time you stopped yourself from doing something because you were afraid of what might happen?
Or maybe, when was the last time you started something, felt excited about it, and then slowly, quietly let it go?
We've all been there, and today we're going to talk about that, honestly, openly, and in English, of course.
Oh, and one more thing before we get into it. We know this podcast brings together people from a lot of different levels. Some of you are intermediate, some of you are still building confidence with English.
And some of you are more advanced, and you're here because, well, good content is good content.
Exactly. So whenever we use a word that might be a little tricky or unfamiliar, we'll stop. We'll explain it. No one gets left behind.
No one. That's kind of our thing.
All right. Take a breath, get comfortable, and let's get into it.
Okay. Today's episode is inspired by a book, a really powerful one.
Yes, it's called Unlimited Power by Tony Robbins. Now, we're not going to read you the book cover to cover, don't worry.
No. But some of the ideas in it are so relevant, not just for life in general, but specifically for the journey of learning a language. So we're going to weave some of those ideas into the conversation today.
And honestly, even if you've never heard of Tony Robbins or the book, that's completely fine. Everything will make sense as we go. We'll give you all the context you need.
All right, now we can really get into it.
So let's start with something that I think a lot of people can relate to. That feeling you get when you're about to do something new, something you've never done before, and your brain just stops.
That freeze.
Exactly, that freeze, like your whole body is saying, wait, I don't know enough to do this yet.
I know that feeling really well, actually. And I think it's one of the most common things that holds people back. This idea that you have to know everything before you can start anything.
Right, and Tony Robbins talks about this in Unlimited Power. He says that fear, that kind of paralyzing fear, it's not something that exists outside of you. It's not a physical wall. It's a mental representation, something your mind creates.
That's such an important point. And the word he uses, or at least one of the key ideas, is this, that your brain creates what he calls a limiting belief. Now, limiting belief is a phrase worth stopping on for a second.
Yeah, let's break that down. Limiting comes from the verb to limit, which means to put a boundary on something, to stop it from going further. And a belief is something you think is true, something you're convinced of.
So, a limiting belief is basically a thought that you're convinced is true, but it's actually putting a wall around what you think you're capable of doing.
Like, for example, I can't speak English because I don't know enough words. Or, I'll start when my grammar is better. Sound familiar?
Very familiar. I've heard that one 1,000 times. And honestly, I've said something like that myself in other areas of my life.
We all have. And the thing is, the fear isn't coming from English. It's not coming from the grammar or the vocabulary. It's coming from the story you're telling yourself about what might happen if you try and it doesn't go perfectly.
Which brings us to something really central in Robbins' thinking. He talks about how the real power isn't knowing everything. It's the ability to act, to move, even when you're not sure.
And that word, to act, in this context, doesn't mean acting like in a movie. It means to do something, to take action, to move forward.
Good point. Context really changes meaning in English.
It really does. But yes, the idea is that waiting until you feel ready is often just fear wearing a very reasonable-sounding costume.
Oh, I love that. Fear in a costume. But it's true. It looks so logical. I just need a little more time. I just need to study a bit more. And then months go by.
Years sometimes.
Years, and you're in the same place. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because Robbins doesn't just say, ignore the fear and go for it. He goes deeper than that. He talks about redefining what failure even means.
Right, and redefining is a great word. Re, at the beginning, means doing something again, but differently. So to redefine something means to change how you define it, how you see it, how you understand it.
So instead of seeing failure as proof that you're not good enough, you start seeing it as feedback, as information.
And feedback is a word that comes up a lot in this context. It means a response or a reaction that tells you something about how you're doing. Like when someone reads your work and gives you their thoughts. That's feedback.
Exactly. And in Robbins' framework, he actually says something pretty direct about this. The idea is that there are no failures, only results. Every outcome, whether it goes well or not, gives you something to work with.
Which, when you apply that to learning English, changes everything. You say something wrong, that's not a failure, that's a result. Now you know what to adjust.
You have a conversation and you don't understand half of it? That's not embarrassing. That's data. That's your brain saying, okay, this is where we need more practice.
I actually remember the first time I tried to have a real conversation in another language. I was so nervous. I had studied for months, I knew the grammar, I could write sentences, and then the moment a real person started talking to me, my mind just went completely blank.
Oh, no.
Completely blank, like someone had just unplugged everything. And I remember feeling so embarrassed, like all that studying had been for nothing.
But it hadn't been for nothing.
It hadn't. But in that moment, I thought it had. Because I was measuring it the wrong way. I was treating that blank moment as a failure, instead of seeing it as just one result, one data point.
And that's the shift. That's what this whole concept is about. It's not about pretending the fear isn't there. It's about changing what the fear actually means to you.
Because if the worst thing that can happen is that you get some feedback, that you learn something, then suddenly the unknown doesn't feel so threatening.
It becomes a field of possibilities. I think that's actually how Robbins puts it. Not a threat, a field of possibilities.
I like that. And I think it applies so directly to language learning because so much of the fear around speaking English, especially for intermediate learners, is this idea that people will judge you, that they'll notice your accent or that you'll forget a word or that the sentence will come out a little strange.
And the reality is, most people are just happy you're trying. Genuinely. And even when something sounds a little off, the conversation keeps moving. Life goes on.
Life goes on, which is really all you need to know.
Exactly. So if you're someone who's been waiting until you feel ready to start speaking, or to watch your first show in English without subtitles, or to have your first real conversation, maybe today is a good day to ask yourself, what am I actually afraid of? And what would happen if I just tried?
No pressure, just a thought.
Just a thought. All right, we're going to keep this energy going because our next topic connects really naturally to everything we just talked about. We're moving into self-confidence because once you start to let go of that fear, something else has to grow in its place.
And that something is confidence. We'll get into what it actually is, where it comes from, and how to build it, even on the days when you really don't feel like it.
Okay, so confidence. Big word, big topic. And I think the first thing we need to do is get rid of a very common idea that most people have about it.
Which is?
That confidence is something you either have or you don't. Like it's a personality trait, something you're born with. Some people just walk into a room and own it, and others don't. And that's just how it is.
Right. And Robbins completely challenges that. He says confidence isn't something you have, it's something you create. You build it, actively, on purpose.
And I think that's genuinely one of the most freeing ideas in the whole book. Because if confidence is just a fixed thing you're born with, then there's nothing you can do. You're stuck. But if it's something you create,
then it's available to everyone, including you, whoever's listening right now.
Exactly. Now, how do you create it? Robbins talks a lot about two things. Your focus, meaning what you choose to pay attention to, and your physical state, how your body actually feels in a given moment.
And the physical state part is interesting because it's very practical. He talks about how your body and your mind are deeply connected. The way you hold your shoulders, the way you breathe, whether you're looking down or looking straight ahead, all of that sends signals to your brain about how you should feel.
It sounds almost too simple, right? Like stand up straight and suddenly you're confident?
I know. But there's actually a lot to it. Think about it. When you feel nervous, what does your body do? You kind of fold inward, shoulders forward, eyes down. Voice gets quieter.
Yeah, you make yourself smaller.
You make yourself smaller. And when you change that posture, even consciously, even if you don't feel confident yet, your brain starts to receive a different signal. It's not a magic trick. It's more like you're giving your mind something to work with.
I actually tried this once. I had a presentation at work, really important one, and I was terrified the night before. I barely slept. But right before I walked in, I remembered reading something about this, and I just stood differently, breathed more slowly, spoke a little louder than I felt like speaking.
And?
And it wasn't perfect. I still stumbled over a few things, but something shifted. I felt more present, more like I was actually there, doing it, instead of watching myself from outside and judging every word.
That feeling of watching yourself from outside is really common, by the way. It even has a name in psychology. It's called self-monitoring. And when you do it too much, it actually gets in the way of performing well. You're so focused on how you're coming across that you forget to just communicate.
And this is so relevant to English learners because I think one of the biggest confidence killers isn't actually the language, it's the accent.
Oh, absolutely.
People are so afraid of their accent, of sounding too foreign, or of being misunderstood, or of people smiling politely while secretly not understanding a word.
That specific fear, and I get it, I really do, because an accent feels personal. It's connected to who you are, where you're from, how you grew up. When someone reacts negatively to your accent, it doesn't just feel like a language problem. It feels like a rejection of something deeper.
It does. And I think that's why so many people hold back. Not because they can't communicate, they can, but because they don't want to be judged. They don't want that moment of, sorry, what? Or someone switching to another language because it's easier.
But here's the thing, and this is where the confidence piece comes back. Your accent is not the problem. The belief that your accent makes you less worthy of being heard, that is the problem.
That's worth sitting with for a second, actually.
Some of the most captivating speakers in the world have strong accents. Think about that. An accent doesn't stop communication, it adds character. What actually gets in the way is when you start apologizing for yourself before you've even said anything. When you lower your voice, rush through your words, or avoid the conversation altogether.
And that comes back to focus, right? Because if every time you speak English, you're focused on everything that could go wrong, on the words you might forget, on how your pronunciation sounds, you're already setting yourself up to feel small.
But if you shift that focus, if you ask yourself, what do I actually want to say, instead of how am I going to sound saying it, the whole experience changes.
So here's a question for you. And again, just think about it. You don't have to answer out loud. Is there something you've avoided doing in English? Maybe a conversation, a phone call, a job interview, a trip abroad, because you didn't feel confident enough? And what would it look like if you just decided, not perfectly, but just decided to try it anyway?
Because confidence doesn't come before the action. It comes from the action. You don't wait until you feel ready. You do the thing, and readiness builds from there.
That's the part nobody tells you. Everyone talks about confidence like it's a requirement, like you need to have it first and then you can start. But it actually works the other way around.
You build it by showing up repeatedly, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when your accent is there, your grammar isn't perfect, and you forget the word you needed right in the middle of the sentence.
Which happens to everyone, by the way, even in their first language.
All the time. And the more you do it, the more evidence you collect that you can do it. And that evidence is what confidence is actually made of. It's not a feeling that appears out of nowhere. It's something you earn, one small action at a time.
One conversation at a time, one episode at a time.
Exactly. All right, we're going to keep building on this because the next thing we want to talk about ties directly into everything we've just said. Because once you start working on your confidence, you need something to point it toward. You need a goal. And more importantly, you need to know how to actually stick with it.
Because starting is one thing, but staying in it when it gets hard, that's a whole different skill. And we're going to talk about that next.
Okay, so it's the 1st of January, new year, new you. You've got a coffee in your hand, you're feeling motivated, and you tell yourself, this year is going to be different. This year I'm going to get fit, learn English, find a better job, read more books, wake up earlier.
All of them, all at the same time.
All of them simultaneously, starting Monday. And then February arrives.
February arrives and somehow none of it stuck. And the crazy thing is that this happens to almost everyone. It's not a personal failure. It's almost like a pattern.
It is a pattern. And I think the reason most New Year's resolutions fall apart isn't lack of motivation, at least not at the beginning. It's that the goal was never clear enough to begin with. I want to improve my English is not a goal, it's a wish.
There's a real difference between those two things. A wish is vague. It lives somewhere in the future, disconnected from anything you can actually do today. A goal is specific. It has a shape. You can look at it and know whether you're moving toward it or not.
And this is exactly what Robbins builds on in Unlimited Power. He says that the very first step of what he calls the ultimate success formula is knowing precisely what you want. Not roughly, not generally, precisely.
Because if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. And that sounds almost like a good thing at first, but it isn't. It means you're just drifting.
Drifting is a nice word here, actually. It means moving without direction, like a boat with no one steering. You're moving, but you're not going anywhere in particular.
And a lot of people spend years drifting with their English. They study a little here, watch something there, do a few lessons when they feel like it, and then wonder why they don't feel more advanced after all this time.
Because effort without direction is just energy spent. It doesn't automatically convert into progress.
So what does a real goal look like?
I think this is where it gets practical, and I love the video game comparison for this, because I think most people, whether they're gamers or not, can understand the logic.
Ooh, this is a good one.
When you play a video game, you don't start at level 1 and immediately try to fight the final boss. And final boss, for anyone who's not familiar with gaming, is the big, powerful enemy you face at the very end of the game, the hardest challenge.
Right. And the reason games work so well, the reason they're so addictive even, is because they're designed around small, achievable missions. You complete one thing, you level up, you get a little stronger, and then you face the next challenge, which is slightly harder, but you're also slightly more prepared.
And there's a reward at every step. You feel progress, you feel momentum. Momentum meaning the energy that builds when you keep moving forward. Like a ball rolling downhill, it gains speed.
And that feeling of momentum is incredibly important when it comes to not giving up. Because people don't usually quit because something is too hard. They quit because they stop feeling like they're moving.
They stop seeing results. Or they set a goal so big, so far away, that every day feels like they're standing at the bottom of a mountain just staring up.
So the fix isn't to lower the goal, it's to break it down into what Robbins calls manageable steps. And manageable is a great word. It means something you can actually handle, something that fits in your hands, so to speak.
Applied to English, this could look like something really concrete. Instead of, I want to be fluent, you say, I want to be able to hold a 5-minute conversation about my job by the end of this month. That's specific. That's measurable. You know when you've done it.
And you can break that down even further. This week, I'll learn 10 words related to my work. Tomorrow, I'll watch one video in English without Spanish subtitles. Right now, I'm listening to this podcast.
Right now, you're already in the game.
Which brings us to the other side of this. Because even with a clear goal and a solid plan, things go wrong. Life gets in the way. You miss a week. You have a bad conversation in English and it knocks your confidence. You plateau and feel like you're not improving anymore.
And this is where Robbins makes a distinction that I think is really, really valuable. He says that the difference between people who succeed and people who don't isn't that successful people have fewer problems. It's how they respond to the problems they have.
And the response he talks about goes back to something we mentioned earlier, feedback, not failure. When something goes wrong, the question isn't, why does this always happen to me? The question is, what is this telling me and what do I adjust?
That shift in language is actually enormous because why does this always happen to me is a closed question. It keeps you stuck, looking backward, feeling like a victim of your own story.
But what can I adjust is open. It points forward. It puts you back in control.
I think about this with language learning specifically because the frustration is so real. There's a stage, and a lot of intermediate learners know this stage well, where you feel like you've stopped improving. You've been studying for months, maybe years, and yet conversations still feel hard. You still miss things, you still search for words.
And that stage is brutal. It's called a plateau. A plateau is actually a geographical word. It refers to a flat, elevated area of land. No more climbing, but you're not going down either. Just flat.
And in learning, it feels exactly like that, like the progress has just stopped. And a lot of people quit right there, which is genuinely tragic, because that plateau usually comes right before a breakthrough.
Breakthrough meaning a sudden leap forward, a moment where things click and you realize you understand more than you thought. You can say things you couldn't say before. It often feels sudden, but it's actually the result of all that quiet work you did during the flat period.
So if you're in a plateau right now, stay. Don't quit. Adjust your approach if you need to, find a new resource, try a different method, but don't interpret the flatness as failure. It's part of the process.
And honestly, the people who get through those flat stretches are not necessarily more talented. They're just more committed to the idea that results come in their own time, not always when you expect them.
You plant the seed, you water it, and sometimes it takes longer than you'd like. But if you stop watering it because it hasn't grown yet, well, then you've answered your own question about why it didn't grow.
That's a good one. Write that down, someone.
Okay, so to bring this all together before we move on, know what you want. Make it specific. Break it into small missions. And when things get hard, ask yourself what you can learn and adjust, not whether you should quit, because the answer to that last question is almost always no.
Almost always. All right, we've talked about fear, we've talked about confidence, we've talked about goals and resilience, and now we want to shift to something that doesn't get nearly enough attention when people talk about personal growth.
Because all of this, the mindset, the motivation, the goals, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in an environment. And your environment is either helping you or quietly working against you.
So that's what we're getting into next.
Okay, so I want to start this one with a question. Think about the 5 people you spend the most time with. Not your favorite people necessarily, just the ones who are actually present in your daily life. Your close friends, your family, your colleagues, whoever it is.
Got them in mind?
Now think about their energy, their habits, the way they talk about the future, whether they encourage you or whether they, maybe without even meaning to, pull you back toward where you've always been.
That's a heavy question.
It is, and there's a reason we're asking it, because one of the most striking ideas in Unlimited Power is the one that says you become the people you spend the most time with. If you want different results in your life, you may need to look at your reference group. And reference group simply means the people you use as a point of comparison for what's normal, what's possible, what's acceptable.
And I think most people, when they hear that, have one of 2 reactions. Either they nod, because they've already felt this in their own life, or they push back a little, because it sounds harsh, like you're being told to get rid of your friends.
Which is not really what Robbins is saying. He's not saying cut everyone off. He's saying be conscious of the influence, be aware of it, because it's happening whether you notice it or not.
And conscious here means aware, paying attention. Being conscious of something means you're not just letting it happen automatically. You see it.
There's actually a term in the book for this idea. Robbins calls it modeling. Not modeling like fashion, but modeling as in copying. Observing how someone behaves and unconsciously, or sometimes very consciously, starting to do the same.
And it works in both directions. If you're surrounded by people who read, who are curious, who talk about growth and ideas and possibilities, you start to absorb that. It becomes your normal. And normal is a more powerful word than people realize, because what feels normal to you determines what you'll even attempt.
Exactly. If everyone around you has learned a second language, then learning one feels achievable. Of course it does. You've seen it happen. You have living proof that it's possible. But if no one in your immediate circle has ever done it, it can feel like something that happens to other people, to a different kind of person.
And Robbins talks about this as your map of what's possible, the mental image you carry of what a life like yours can look like. And that map is built largely by what you've seen with your own eyes.
I think about this a lot with first-generation students, people who are the first in their family to go to university or to move abroad or to work in a certain field. The challenge isn't always academic. It's that they don't have models. They don't have someone ahead of them saying, "Look, I did it. Here's how."
And that absence of a model can be quietly devastating, not because the person isn't capable, but because capability alone isn't always enough to generate belief. You also need a sense that it's possible for someone like you.
Which is why representation matters so much. And not just in big public ways. It matters in small personal ones too. a friend who learned English from scratch, a colleague who changed careers at 40, a neighbor who built something from nothing. Those examples reshape what you think is within reach.
Now, here's where I want to push back a little on the idea, or at least add something to it. Because I think there's a risk of reading Robbins on this and walking away feeling like if your environment isn't perfect, you're stuck. Like your circumstances determine your destiny.
And that's not what he's saying at all, actually.
No, he's very clear that the environment is a powerful influence, but it is not the only one. Knowledge can expand your map. Your imagination can expand your map. The books you read, the podcasts you listen to, the conversations you have with people outside your usual circle, all of that feeds into who you become.
The podcast you listen to.
I wasn't going to say it, but since you did.
Look, genuinely though, think about it. Right now, someone listening to this might be on a bus in a city where English isn't spoken much, where the people around them might not see the point of learning it. And yet here they are, choosing this, choosing to build something even without a perfect environment.
And that choice is the crack in the wall. You can't always choose your environment immediately, but you can choose what you let in. You can choose whose voice you listen to, whose examples you follow. What kind of content fills your mind during your commute, your lunch break, your time before bed?
And that's a form of curating your environment. Curating is a word that originally came from the art world. A curator is someone who carefully selects and organizes pieces for an exhibition. But now we use it more broadly to mean deliberately choosing what you include in your life.
I love that word in this context because it implies intention. You're not just passively receiving whatever's around you, you're actively selecting.
So here's a thought to sit with. Not a directive, just a question. Is there something you've been consuming regularly, whether that's content, conversations, or company, that might be quietly narrowing your idea of what's possible for you?
And on the flip side, is there something you've been avoiding, a community, a type of content, a group of people that might actually expand it?
Because the environment you build around yourself, even digitally, even partially, is one of the most powerful tools you have. It doesn't replace the work, but it shapes whether the work feels worth doing in the first place.
All right. Speaking of things that shape how we feel and what we do, we're moving into something that I think is going to be really interesting because we've been talking a lot about mindset and environment, things that work on a longer time scale. But what about the moment itself? What about those specific triggers that instantly shift your mood, your energy, your state?
Yeah, we're talking about anchors, what Robbins calls anchors, and what we're calling triggers and vibes.
A little more relatable, maybe.
Just a little, but the idea is genuinely fascinating and very practical. So let's get into it.
Okay, so before we get into the technical side of this, I want to ask you something. Is there a song, any song, that when it comes on, it instantly takes you somewhere? Like you're not just hearing the music, you're actually back in a specific moment?
Oh, absolutely, without even thinking about it. There's this one song I used to listen to on repeat during a road trip years ago with my closest friends. And honestly, the second it starts playing, I'm back in that car. Same feeling, same energy. It's almost strange how fast it happens.
Right? It's almost involuntary. You don't decide to feel that way, you just do.
And that, right there, is an anchor. That's what Robbins is talking about. In Unlimited Power, he calls this process anchoring, and it comes from something called NLP, which stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming. That's a mouthful, so let's just break it down very quickly.
Neuro refers to the brain and the nervous system. Linguistic is about language, the words and signals we use, and programming means the patterns of behavior we develop over time. So NLP at its core is about understanding how your mind processes the world and how you can intentionally influence that process.
And anchoring is one of the key techniques within that. Robbins defines an anchor as any sensory stimulus that gets linked to a specific emotional or mental state. Sensory meaning something your senses pick up, something you hear, see, feel, smell, or touch.
So that song is an auditory anchor, something you hear that pulls you back to a feeling. But anchors aren't only about music. They can be a smell, like the scent of a particular food that takes you straight back to your grandmother's kitchen.
Or a physical sensation, the feeling of sand under your feet and suddenly you're relaxed in a way you can't quite explain. Or even a word, a phrase, a tone of voice.
And here's what makes it really interesting. Most of our anchors weren't created on purpose. They happen naturally, without us knowing. You were in a strong emotional moment, something specific was happening around you at the same time, and your brain made a connection. Now that something triggers the feeling automatically.
Robbins actually uses a reference that I think most people find really relatable. It's like Pavlov's dog. Now, if you don't know who Pavlov is, here's the short version. Ivan Pavlov was a Russian scientist who ran a famous experiment with dogs. Every time he gave them food, he rang a bell. After repeating this many times, he started ringing the bell without bringing any food, and the dogs still responded as if food was coming. They'd already made the connection.
So the bell became an anchor for the feeling of anticipating food. The stimulus and the response got linked together. And Robbins says our brains do this constantly, all day long, with everything around us.
Which explains a lot, honestly. Like why walking into your old school can make you feel like a teenager again, even if you're 35. Or why sitting in a particular chair always makes you want to sleep. Or why certain people's voices make you feel calm before they've even said anything meaningful.
Or why the sound of your alarm in the morning can fill you with a specific kind of dread.
That one is very real, very, very real. Now, here's the part that gets really useful, because Robbins isn't just describing how anchors work. He's teaching you to create them on purpose, intentionally.
And the process is actually pretty straightforward. The key is this. An anchor forms most powerfully when two things happen at the same time. First, you're in a moment of high emotional intensity, and second, a very specific stimulus occurs right at the peak of that feeling.
So your brain links the two together. And from that point on, whenever you encounter that stimulus again, it pulls the emotional state back up with it.
One practical example Robbins gives is using a physical gesture, like squeezing your fist, at a moment when you genuinely feel confident, strong, capable. Maybe you just nailed something at work. Maybe you finished a workout and you feel incredible. In that peak moment, you make the gesture.
And over time, with repetition, that gesture becomes the trigger. You squeeze your fist before a difficult conversation or a stressful situation, and your body starts to recall that state of confidence.
Now, I know what some people might be thinking. Is this just making something up, tricking your brain?
And the honest answer is, kind of, but in the best possible way, because the emotional state was real. The confidence was real. You're not inventing it, you're just creating a shortcut to get back there. And this connects directly to language learning in a way I find really exciting, because a lot of people have very negative anchors around English. Think about it. If your first real memory of English class was a teacher correcting you in front of everyone and you felt embarrassed, that embarrassment can become an anchor. Now, every time you try to speak English, that feeling shows up uninvited.
And you don't even know why you feel so tense. You just do. It feels like a reflex.
Because it is a reflex, a learned one. So the question becomes, what if you could replace that? What if you could start building new anchors around English that are tied to curiosity or fun, or that feeling of connection when someone actually understands you?
That's what Robbins calls anchor collapse, by the way. Not creating a new anchor, but actively pairing a negative one with a positive one until the negative one loses its grip.
And even without going that deep into the technique, just being aware that these associations exist, that your emotions around English aren't fixed facts about your ability, they're learned responses, that alone can start to shift things.
Here's a small question to sit with. What's your current anchor for English? When you think about speaking it, or hearing it, or using it in a real situation, what's the first feeling that comes up? Is it excitement, nervousness, curiosity, something from a long time ago?
Because that feeling is telling you something, not about your potential, but about your history. And history can be rewritten, slowly, intentionally, with the right kind of repetition.
All right, we've covered a lot of ground today. Fear, confidence, goals, environment, anchors. And all of these topics, as different as they seem on the surface, are actually connected by one thing.
The questions you ask yourself, inside your own head, the internal dialogue that runs constantly, whether you notice it or not. And that's exactly what we're getting into next.
Because Robbins has a lot to say about that. And it might be the most practical piece of everything we've talked about today. Okay, so everything we've talked about today lives somewhere. And that somewhere is inside your own head, in the conversation you have with yourself, constantly, whether you notice it or not.
And most people don't notice it. Or they notice it when it gets really loud, when the voice is being particularly unkind. But most of the time, it just runs in the background, like an app you forgot to close.
And Robbins makes a very specific point about this. He says that internal dialogue isn't random. It has a structure, and that structure is built out of questions.
Which sounds almost too simple. Questions? That's the big idea?
I know, but stay with it, because the thing is, your brain is wired to answer whatever question you give it. It doesn't really have a choice. It just goes looking for evidence.
So if you ask yourself, why am I so bad at this? Your brain gets to work. It pulls up every mistake, every awkward moment, every time something didn't go the way you wanted, and suddenly you've built a very convincing case against yourself.
Which you built entirely on your own without even meaning to.
And it works the other way too. Ask, what's one thing I actually handled well today? And your brain finds that instead, even on a rough day. It's not magic, it's just where you're pointing the flashlight.
Robbins actually says something pretty direct about this, that the quality of your life is largely shaped by the quality of the questions you habitually ask yourself. Not your talent, not your situation, the questions.
And I think one of the most useful things in this section of the book is the distinction between why and how, because those two little words pull you in completely different directions.
Why questions, especially when you're struggling, tend to drag you backward. Why does this always happen to me? Why can't I just get this right? And your brain, helpful as ever, answers. It gives you reasons, detailed ones, and those reasons keep you exactly where you are.
Whereas how opens a door. How can I approach this differently? How have I dealt with something like this before? You're not looking for an explanation anymore, you're looking for a way forward.
I started paying attention to this in my own head, and honestly, it was a little uncomfortable at first, because you realize how many of the questions running on loop are just closed loops. They go nowhere.
Yeah, it's not always pretty when you actually listen in.
No, it's not, but just noticing it is already something. Just catching yourself mid-spiral and going, okay, what am I actually asking right now? That pause alone can change the direction.
And this is so relevant for English specifically because the questions people ask themselves around language learning can be quietly devastating. Why do I always freeze when someone speaks fast? Why does everyone else seem to find this easier than me?
None of those help. They just collect evidence for a story that keeps you stuck. So what happens if you rephrase? Why do I always freeze becomes, what's one thing I can do to feel more prepared next time?
Why does everyone else find this easier becomes, honestly, does that even matter? And what can I do today?
That last one is very direct.
Sometimes you need direct, especially when the comparison spiral kicks in. You see someone online who's been learning for 6 months and sounds incredible, and you've been at it for 2 years, and suddenly you're not asking a question, you're just sinking.
And the way out of that is to pull the question back to yourself, to your own process, to what's actually in your control.
Robbins also talks about what he calls outcome questions. Things like, what do I actually want here? What would a good version of this look like? And they sound simple, almost obvious, but making yourself articulate it, even just in your head, changes your orientation completely.
You stop drifting and start moving in a direction, which connects back to everything we said about goals earlier. It all feeds into the same thing.
There's one more idea here I really like, and it's about breaking a limiting belief not with an argument, but with a question. So instead of telling someone, you can do this, which they may or may not believe, you ask, what would happen if you actually could?
And that question does something clever. It doesn't ask you to believe anything yet. It just asks you to consider a possibility, to imagine it for a second. And that's a much lower barrier.
What if I could is so much easier than I can. One's a hypothesis, the other feels like a commitment you're not sure you're ready to make.
So here's the one we'll leave you with for this part. Think about a question you've been asking yourself about your English or about something else that might actually be working against you. And ask yourself, what would happen if I replaced it with something that pointed forward instead?
No pressure. Just something to sit with.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today, and before we wrap up, we want to bring it all together. Not in a here's your homework kind of way, just a moment to let it land.
We started with fear, that freeze you get before something new, and the idea that fear isn't a wall out there in the world, it's a story your mind is telling you, and stories can change.
Then we talked about confidence. And the thing that stuck with me most from that conversation is this. Confidence isn't something you wait for. It's something you build by showing up, even when you don't feel ready.
After that, goals, and the difference between a wish and an actual goal. Specific, small, manageable, like missions in a game, one at a time.
Then your environment, the people around you, the content you consume, the voices you let in. All of it is shaping what you think is possible, and you have more control over that than you might think.
Anchors, those automatic emotional responses that got wired in without you noticing, and the idea that you can slowly and intentionally start building new ones.
And finally, the questions, the ones running on loop in your head, because the quality of those questions, honestly, determines a lot. Not everything, but a lot.
And what ties all of this together, I think, is something pretty simple. You are not stuck. Whatever level your English is at right now, whatever stage of life you're in, whatever that inner voice has been telling you, none of that is the final word.
It's just where you are today. And today is a pretty good place to start from.
Okay. I feel like that deserves a moment of silence.
Just a brief one.
All right. Before we go, we just want to say thank you, genuinely, for being here, for listening, for choosing to spend this time on something that matters to you.
Whether you caught every word or just pieces of it, that's okay. That's how it works. You come back, you listen again, and each time a little more sticks.
That's the process, and you're already in it.
We'll be back next Wednesday with Max and Mia. Until then, take care of yourselves.
And keep going. See you next week.
To keep taking your English to the next level, click on the next video or explore the others we've made for you.